Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Zach.
And I'm Seth.
We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right, we are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
What a great day.
What a great day.
What a fabulous morning.
Stay a while and listen.
Stay a while, listen.
Stay a while and listen.
What if we just did that for every podcast?
We should just start every podcast by quoting Deckard Cain.
And then just talk about Diablo.
Well, the new one's coming out, so
we can almost move on to talk about Diablo 2.
That's right.
Because we talked about Diablo 1.
Diablo 2, the sequel to Diablo, the sequel to Myst, the prequel to Jungle Strike.
I was watching a guy who has a YouTube channel called Gaming the Systems. And it's a retro game channel, and he had not played any of the Strike series, but he owns them. And he was like, I'm going to start playing it with Desert Strike, and he commented, it's Desert Strike Return to the Gulf. Sounds like a sequel, but it's the first game. Jungle Strike is just Jungle Strike, the sequel to Desert Strike, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Jungle Strike, the sequel to Desert Strike, which is a great name for a game.
I wish they had something that was like whatever strike, like Nuclear Strike or something, but it was set in the Gulf, so then they could be like Nuclear Strike back again to the Gulf.
Return to the Gulf.
Anyway, let's get into the chit-chatting about stuff that we've recently been playing. So, Zach, what have you recently been playing?
Seth, recently I have been playing myhouse.wad. Myhouse.wad is a mod of Doom 2 that I don't even know where to start. Basically, back on March 3rd of this year, a post showed up on I believe the Doom World forums, where someone said, I recently created this WAD as a tribute to my friend who passed away. It's based on his childhood home. They were like, I found a floppy disk that we were working on when we were kids, and I decided I was going to continue work on it. Feel free to check it out. Let me tell you, this is a crazy game.
Did you check it out?
Oh man. myhouse.wad is so much more than just a map of someone's house. It is, without a doubt, one of the most surrealist horror experiences that I've played as a video game in a very long time, and it might be one of the best, abstract horror games to come out this year. It's a game almost entirely based on House of Leaves, which is a novel that is famous for having an abstract form of writing, where, text will randomly start trailing off the page and, spilling into other pages, and, words from other chapters will just randomly appear in the chapter you're reading in, boxes and stuff like that. It's a very abstract book, and this is a very abstract game, because as you explore this house, you'll find out that this house is not just a normal house, and this is not just a normal Doom WAD. For one thing, it's about 60 megabytes, which is bigger than both Doom 1 and 2 combined. And the other thing is that the house you're exploring has floors.
Yeah, which is not possible in the Doom engine.
But it does it, and it's running in Doom. It's running in the Doom engine. It uses GZ Doom, which is a source port, but GZ Doom alone cannot do that. So this is very complex programming for a Doom WAD. And it's tiny things like that. It's like when you're exploring the house and you go down into the basement for the first time, and you're like, wait a second, I'm in a basement underneath the house. Or when you go into the attic and you're like, wait a second, I'm in an attic in a Doom game, and there was no transition. I naturally went up here, sort of deal. It's stuff like that. There's also other things that start happening through the game. What I would say is, I don't want to give too much away, and I haven't even discovered all the secrets yet. I think I got one of the bad endings, because there are multiple endings to this game. But when you first start playing it, go through the house, collect the keys, and when you get the blue key, leave. Play through the second level of Doom 2, which is Underhall. Collect all of the ammo you can, and when you finish Underhall, you'll go back to the house, and when you replay the house, don't leave. So when you get the blue key, don't leave. Go around the house and enter the back door, and that's where the game begins.
What? Does anyone tell you to do that?
No. I learned this from watching a video on YouTube, but when you enter through the back door, the second time, you are in a new house and everything has changed.
So is it scary? Is it like My Buddy Simulator scary? Or is it Mortuary Assistant scary?
It's like My Buddy Simulator scary. It is unsettling.
Oh, okay. So I could play it without getting scared.
Yeah, there are parts that did legitimately terrify me in a kind of way. There's one part where I ended up in this massive cavern. It's very much inspired by Liminal Space, if anyone knows what that is, where it's empty rooms that just feel unsettling. I ended up in this empty room, and I started getting attacked by an invisible ghost. And that kind of freaked me out. Yeah, the game is very much inspired by House of Leaves. It's very much inspired by Liminal Space horror. If people are familiar with the back rooms. In fact, if you try to no clip in the game, you will enter the back rooms.
Oh, that's fun.
You can't no clip. If you try to no clip, you'll fall out of the map and you'll enter the back rooms. And if you're in the back rooms, you have to escape them. And it's possibly one of the hardest mazes of a Doom mod. And you're constantly chased by an invincible enemy.
Yeah, the backrooms are like this weird creepypasta that's online. I've gotten a little bit not into them. I'm familiar with them.
Yeah, so it's that kind of horror. So you will need a copy of GZ Doom. You need a copy of the My House It's actually a .pk3, not .wad. It's just called .wad. And you do need a copy of Doom 2. I think you can play it using like Free Doom, which is an open source version of Doom. But I would say probably the purest experience would be playing it through Doom 2, because it just kind of hits a little differently when you are familiar with the textures and stuff of Doom versus the Free Doom textures.
Which you could get off of Good Old Games.
Yeah, for pretty cheap. It's usually, I think, running like $5. So.
And it's Doom 2. Like, it's a great game.
Yes, and GZ Doom is just a great open source version of Doom. So it's like open source platform to run Doom on. So if you don't have GZ Doom and you want to play Doom, just get GZ Doom and play Doom. But now you'll also have the myhouse.wad mod to play. And good luck. I still need to replay it because I got, again, to one of the bad endings and I need to figure out how to get further in it. Like, I kind of know what I'm doing, but at one point you're supposed to do something and enter a nursery home or nursery school. So every area you enter is modeled on the house. Sometimes it will be bigger, sometimes it will be smaller, but it follows the same structure of the house, which is unnerving. So at one point you enter an airport and it is modeled after the house. So like, you know where everything is, but it's an airport. In another part, you're in a preschool and it's modeled after the house. You know where everything is, but it's a preschool. It's just unnerving stuff. Yeah, and there's a couple of videos online of people going through it, which if people are interested.
Maybe if we remember, we'll play it during Extra Life.
Yeah, for sure. Seth, what about you? What have you been playing?
Recently, I've been playing Retromania Wrestling, which was released in February of 2021. We might have mentioned WrestleMania Wrestling, but it might have been not in the last. It was not in the last PAX. It might have been at the PAX before or the PAX before that. It was either one PAX or two PAX ago. I'm not exactly sure because it might have been mentioned in the original PAX episode. I think one year we didn't do a PAX episode. But anyway, Retromania Wrestling is a arcade game that is inspired by classic retro wrestling with 2D action and an eclectic roster of wrestlers that are past and present. Also, Zach and I were talking about it earlier, and John Riggs, who's a YouTuber, has a cameo in it during one of the fights. I really like the game. It's got a very retro feel to it. It's got pretty simple controls, but it's one of those where you really need to get the timing and the positioning correct, because if you're off by just a little bit, you're gonna miss. Like, so if I'm like going off of back the ropes and to try and like pin somebody or tackle somebody and I'm not precisely on their right line, I could miss them and just fly into the air and do nothing. So it's something that is a game where, unlike Doomwad, it's not scary, but it does require some patience as you attempt to master it. Very cool settings. The graphics are amazing. I really love the graphics are really what brought me to it. I'm not a big wrestling fan, but I really like retro wrestling games. So like classic wrestling games like Retromania Wrestling tries to be and succeeds, or like even like early like SNES, N64 type wrestling games. Anything past N64 I'm not really that interested in, but I like those type of wrestling games. So it's on Steam and it's right now MSRPing for $29.99, but it does include 17 licensed playable wrestlers and they're planning on expanding it. There's 20 arenas. You can get local multiplayer up to 8 players, and there is beautiful pixel art, as we mentioned. You can even get ring entrances complete with nameplate and entrance music. And there's various different match types: one-on-one, tag team, best of 3, cage matches with different cage styles, and battle royale. So I just started doing the original, like just the story mode, but I think it's actually going to be a really fun game to play like on the couch or something.
Nice. That's another game we could play during Extra Life if we remember.
It's true. But maybe also because it has up to 8 players, we can play it during Brocation.
Ooh.
So anyway, today's episode we're going to be talking about Animal Crossing, which Zach has a lot of experience playing the newest version. I think it became very popular. I even had like a coworker who was not into video games telling me that she was a billionaire, because that's like the bells are the currency. She's like, I'm a billionaire, and I didn't play it, but I think I played some of the original game. Now, Animal Crossing, or Dobutsu no Mori, was developed by Nintendo Entertainment Analysis and Development Division, better known as Nintendo EAD, and formerly known as Nintendo R&D 4. This is the same division of the company that also worked on games like Super Mario Bros., Donkey Kong, The Legend of Zelda, F-Zero, Star Fox, and pretty much any big intellectual property that Nintendo decided to do. R&D 4 was the division that did it. The concept of Animal Crossing came about shortly after the release of Yoshi's Story in 1997. At the time, Nintendo was working on development of the Nintendo 64 DD, which was a floppy disk add-on for the N64 that would allow players to use specialized discs instead of cartridges. These specialized discs would open up the N64 to having the ability to have rewritable data storage, a real-time clock, and standardized font and audio libraries. This is novel for the time and would really open up the capabilities to do additional things with their games. For example, I believe real-time clocks are added into later Pokemon games, and you're able to actually add like morning and evening events to things based on the actual time where it is. So I think that's kind of cool that they were looking to add those features to the N64. Now, the real-time clock was something that Nintendo really wanted to experiment with, as beyond the ability to kind of give you like your daytime, nighttime, but it would also allow for persistent game world designs. Basically, the idea of having a game that you could turn off and essentially, even with the system being off, it could still exist. The N64 DD was delayed more than a few times, and the development of Dobutsu no Mori, which literally translates to Animal Forest, was moved from a disc-based title to a cartridge-based title based on the delays of the N64 DD. It's actually likely somewhat thankful that the game's development was moved from the DD to the standard N64, as the N64 DD would go on to be a commercial failure for Nintendo and was discontinued only 2 years after its launch. The N64 DD ended up releasing with only 10 pieces of software, and only 15,000 units would go on to get sold. Games that were planned for the 64 DD were either canceled or had their development shifted to cartridge or the GameCube. Some titles that were moved to cartridge were Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Stadium, Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards, Mario Party 2, Paper Mario, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and of course, Dobutsu no Mori. And I'm glad that a lot of these games moved to cartridge.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these games are really good N64 games.
Yeah, I mean, some of the best N64 games got their start originally as concepts for the DD. The game, despite moving to a cartridge, would still require a real-time clock. And they would decide that they were actually going to put one into the cartridge itself. This would make Dobutsu no Mori the only N64 game that has a real-time clock in its cartridge, which is pretty neat.
It also would need a battery, right?
So, in order to use the battery for the real-time clock, they had to move the save element for the game to a different way to save. So, they ended up opting to utilize the N64 controller pack, because you have to use the battery for one thing, and having the battery taking up multiple resources would probably kill the battery very quickly. The team that worked on Dobutsu no Mori was largely inexperienced. It was led by Katsuya Iguchi, Hisashi Nagomi, and the Super Mario Bros. Co-creator Takashi Tezuka. The game's sound director was Kazumi Totaka, who previously worked on Wave Race 64, Yoshi's Story, Mario Paint, and other titles.
Man, I love Wave Race.
Wave Race is a great game. Now, Totaka was also a voice actor and would voice the character of Totekeki, or better known in English as KK Slider, who is a white dog that appears in Dobutsu no Mori and plays various music throughout the game. Totaka is also best known for putting hidden Easter eggs in almost every game he works on, called the Totaka Song. The song first was discovered in the title screen of Mario Paint, but Totaka had actually inserted it into his very first game, X, which came out for the Game Boy. And I'm going to insert Totaka's song from X here. And now we're going to play the one that appears in Dobutsu no Mori. The game itself was partially inspired by Katsuya Uguchi's personal history. Katsuya Uguchi accepted a job at Nintendo in 1986. He had to move from Chiba to Kyoto, which, for those who don't know, in Japan are pretty far apart from each other. It's about a 7-hour drive or about a 3.5-hour train ride. This meant that he had to leave his family, friends, and community that he established in Chiba behind and reestablish all these relationships when he moved to Kyoto.
Including his family.
Not including his family, but he had to, find new friends, develop a new sense of community, and really just rebuild his life. And this process was one of the driving factors for how the idea of Debetsu no Mori was developed and what informed the game design. Debetsu no Mori would officially release in Japan in April of 2001, and it was the last game that Nintendo created for the N64 and the third to last game that was released on the system as a whole. The game was also fairly difficult to market, as the gameplay isn't really something that you can just kind of explain easily in a marketing campaign.
It's not like a platformer or a beat 'em up. Or
it's not like
stuff that was selling
Animal
at
Crossing.
that time.
Shoot the bad guys, because you're not doing that. But the thing is, in Animal Crossing, there's no end game, which is also it's almost barely a game, except for the fact it is a game, right? It's it really goes beyond the definitions of what we would call a game. It's very much a simulator. Despite the game having some difficulties with marketing, it did eventually release, and it became a decently successful game, though the GameCube was actually already out. So Nintendo decided that they were going to port Debetsu no Mori directly to the GameCube and provide an enhanced version called Debetsu no Mori Plus. Nintendo doing this was also a way to go about their plan for localization. They weren't going to localize the N64 version, they were just going to localize this new GameCube version, because why would you localize a cartridge game that is for a system that is currently obsolete? Debetsu no Mori Plus, the GameCube version of the game, would release in Japan in December of 2001. So, the N64 version came out in April of 2001. The GameCube version came out in December of 2001.
Yeah, I feel like that's like 3 people could have just been slow on something, and it could have just not come out.
I feel so bad for the people that bought it for the N64 and then saw the GameCube version came out, and they're like, what?
Well, let's be real. First of all, Nintendo doesn't care. We know this for a fact. They're more than happy to sell 2 games to everybody.
It's just wild to me that it's a little different today when PS4 games also come out for PS5, because the consoles they're very different, but the games are pretty much identical. It's my PS4 version just doesn't run as well, which is wild to me. But Debetsu no Mori Plus is a substantially different game. It has some new things added to it that weren't in the N64 version.
Right, but if you didn't have a GameCube, you could still play it.
That's true. The
GameCube was still brand new, so maybe people didn't have there's still a market of people who had N64s and still haven't gotten the money to get a GameCube. They could still enjoy Debetsu no Mori.
That's true. The GameCube version, though, wasn't a simple port. It also would add some new things. It added the museum, which is a staple to Animal Crossing to this day, and the characters of the Able sisters, who own a shop that you can buy clothes.
Now, they would go on to localize it for the American market. Instead of calling it Debetsu no Mori, they called it Animal Crossing, and that would go on to be localized and released in September of 2002. Now, the localized version is pretty different from the original release, largely due to the sheer amount of translation and localization efforts that had to go into it. There were thousands of lines of text that had to be translated and localized from Japanese to English, but because it was a localization, every cultural reference for a Japanese audience had to be reworked to make it relatable to an outside audience. We've talked about this before, but there's a big difference between translating in something and localizing something. 2 games that I can tell you to show clear, different examples of what's translation and what's localization. Animal Crossing was localized. As an American, you could buy Animal Crossing and you'll know what's going on. Zero Wing was translated. At some point in time, this cat creature says all your bases belong to us, and nobody knows why. It's a great meme, but it's not. Nobody knows what's going on.
Yeah.
I've watched the intro to Zero Wing. I don't know what's going on. and I think I'm vaguely a pilot and some panther thing wants me. I play Animal Crossing. I know the plot because it's been localized. Now, Nintendo's localizers, Nate Billedorf and Rich Amtower, had to develop entirely new items and holidays for the games to replace the references to Japanese holidays that would not be easily recognizable to non-Japanese players. Now, the changes to the game were pretty substantial, and substantial enough that Nintendo of Japan wanted to implement them back into the Japanese version of the game. And to do this, they released Dubetsu no Mori E+. For the third time, they will sell the game to the Japanese market. This one, released in 2003, this version of the game added in the new items and holidays created by the localization team for the American market. One interesting thing to note is that in all three versions of Animal Crossing, the N64, the GameCube, and the localized version for the GameCube, feature a variety of NES games that can be unlocked and played. The N64 version has the least amount of games, with only 7 playable NES games. The GameCube version features 14, and the localized version also features 14, but has 2 games from the Japanese version removed, Gomuku Naraba Net Renju and Mahjong, possibly because these games were never given an English release. And the GameCube version, 4 additional games could be obtained through different means. Ice Climber and Mario Brothers were distributed via e-reader cards. The e-reader was for the Game Boy Advance that required you to swipe cards. In Japan, for the readers of Famitsu, there was a prize where Super Mario Brothers was available to be added to the game. And while not officially given away, the entirety of The Legend of Zelda exists in the GameCube and can be put into the game using a cheat device like a Game Genie or something.
Yeah, using a Game Shark. So they intended to put Legend of Zelda into it, and then at the last minute they scrapped the idea. I mean, it wouldn't have been a licensing thing, it was Nintendo, but I think they were just like, we don't want to do that. So they cut it out.
I wonder who makes that decision, right? Because like they went through and they did it. It's in the code. You can add it pretty easily, but then at one point they're like, meh.
So my dumb theory is that a majority of GameCubes came with the Zelda Collector's Disc, which was a promotional disc that had Zelda 1, 2, Ocarina of Time, and Majora's Mask, and a demo for Wind Waker. So part of me was wondering if someone at Nintendo saw what they were doing with Dubetsu no Mori and was like, but everyone's already got a copy for the GameCube for Legend of Zelda. We don't need another.
Because we gave it to them.
We don't need another. So
That's
they're
fair.
just like, yeah, okay, let's cut it out. But they never took the game code out, so you can just reestablish it.
Yeah, they were like, but we already did all this. Well, let's just not activate it.
Yeah. In terms of the gameplay and the plot, Animal Crossing is a simulation game. Your character arrives in a new town and is given a house, though you do have to pay it back as you have a mortgage. It is then up to you to explore, do various activities, talk to your new friends, and as the game uses a real-time clock, various events will occur. You can celebrate Independence Day, there's a Halloween, there's a Harvest Festival, which falls on the same day as Thanksgiving, and Toy Day, which falls on the same day as Christmas. There are also other holidays and various other activities to participate in, such as fishing or daily fitness classes that you can attend. Everything is optional. There's nothing mandatory. Technically, paying back your debt is not even mandatory because there's no interest on it. It just locks you so you can't expand your house.
Wait, so you don't have to pay anything?
You technically don't. If you don't care about expanding your house, if you don't care that your house stays pretty small, you can leave your house the same size and never pay back your loan.
It's like the doctor from Cyberpunk.
Yeah, it's like Vic. Now, in Animal Crossing, there are various characters that you encounter, such as the other villagers or the shopkeepers. One of those shopkeepers is Tom Nook, who is a tanuki, which is a raccoon dog. It's a type of raccoon that lives in Japan. In America, he's localized just as a raccoon because we do not have tanuki. Tom Nook runs the store in town, and he's also the one that sets you up with your mortgage. So he's also kind of like the bank. Every time you pay down your debt, Tom will ask if you want to expand your house, and you will get more debt. Then you will pay it down, and he will be like, do you want to expand your house again? And you will get more debt. There are also the Able sisters, who are twin hedgehogs that run a clothing shop in town, and they are there to get you new clothes. And they appear again throughout the rest of the series. There's also Mr. Rossetti, who is a mole. Mr. Rossetti is there to scold the player if they do not save before shutting off their console. So the proper way to play Animal Crossing when you want to leave is you have to go and you have to talk to this one character who will save your progress, and then you can turn your game off. Well, actually, I believe tell you it is now safe to turn turn off your system. If you just turn off your system, you won't lose technically any progress, but it can mess certain things up. So Mr. Rossetti will come on and he'll be like, don't ever do this again. And he will scold you and he'll get very mad. He like fills up your whole screen with text of just like yelling at you not to do this again. Now, Seth, how did Animal Crossing do?
Well, the first game, is this the first game of the N64?
I couldn't find sales for the N64 version.
We're going to say that first game did all right. The first game that has sales, the GameCube version, Dubetsu no Mori Plus, sold pretty well. It sold 92,568 copies in Japan during its first week alone. The updated version, Dubetsu no Mori E Plus, sold 91,658,000 units in its first week. Upon release worldwide, the game would go on to sell more than 2 million copies. Overall, the game has solid scores, with Famitsu giving the N64 version a 32 out of 40 and the GameCube version a 37 out of 40. Game Informer gave the game a 9.5 out of 10, GamePro gave it 4.5 stars, and GameSpot gave it an 8.1 out of 10. And the TV show X-Play, which was a fun time in my life, ranked it as the 7th best GameCube game of all time. Because before there was Game Ranks, there was X-Play. Now we can watch Game Ranks on YouTube and they'll tell us where it falls in the best GameCube game of all time. And they'll also tell us which 10 games have the most breakable maps or like some random arbitrary thing.
Now, Animal Crossing was a huge success for Nintendo, spawning a pretty big franchise that is still around today. The first sequel, Wild World, was released in 2005 for the Nintendo DS. Another sequel, City Folk, was released in 2008 for the Nintendo Wii. After that, we had New Leaf, which was released in 2012 for the Nintendo 3DS. And most recently was New Horizons, which was released in 2020. New Horizons is notable for being one of the best-selling games of all time, selling over 40 million copies worldwide on release and breaking the console game record for most digital sales in 1 month. Now, I want to let people know there might be a reason that New Horizons sold very well, because it came out in 2020, around the time the COVID pandemic hit. So a lot of people stayed home.
People stayed home and they wanted to pretend they were going places, and they could do that by playing Animal Crossing.
It's still a great game. It's just that I would say a lot of those sales were probably because people were unfortunately very bored and alone. Now, beyond the sequels, we also have various spin-offs, such as Happy Home Designer, Plaza, Amiibo Festival, and Pocket Camp. Pocket Camp was actually a mobile game. It was one of Nintendo's first mobile games, like, properly, and you could get it on your, like, iPhone or Android. The characters of Mr. Rossetti, Villager, and Isabelle have all appeared in the Super Smash Bros. Game. Mr. Rossetti appears as a trophy, so if you activate him, he will take up the entire screen and block everyone from being able to see what they're doing. And in 2006, an animated film called Gekijoban Dobetsu no Mori was released in Japan. I believe it's actually based on Wild World, and yeah, it was an animated film about Animal Crossing.
Well, that's going to be our Animal Crossing episode today. We're going to go on to talk about our retro rewind, and Zach gave me Animaniacs, which was released for the SNES back in 1994. It was also released on the Sega Genesis, I think a year before. It was developed and published by Konami and is a mascot platformer where you play as all three Animaniacs: Yakko, Wacko, and Dot. Yakko's the tall one, Wacko's the middle one, and Dot is the girl. You could like do combo moves with them. You can stand on top of each other and get to high places. You could change around who the character is, the primary character, and they can do slightly different things, but not like different things like Real Monsters different things, which also has a 3-person character game mascot platformer where you play as Ickis, Oblina, or Crumb, and they all do different things. But Animaniacs, they do all very similar-ish things. The game does not have any life. It only has the Animaniacs. So the game ends when all the Animaniacs are defeated one by one. So if you encounter a guard and the guard picks you up, he'll only pick up who you're currently playing as, and then you reset that zone and you play as just the remaining Animaniacs. It's a pretty fun, very nostalgic game. Reminds me a lot of Tiny Toon Adventures Buster Bust Loose, and since that game was also developed by Konami and was released back in 1992, the Animaniacs is kind of like a spiritual successor to that game. So if you enjoy enjoy mascot platformers, I would recommend checking them both out. They both hold up pretty well. The art style is great. It's very the sprites are big, chunky mascot sprites. The art style is clean and crisp and almost feels like you're playing a really like that era cartoon. It's just a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun gags that happen throughout the game, and so I definitely recommend it if you like mascot platformers. Check it out. I recommend playing it with an actual controller. I was playing it with a keyboard because I was playing it in my browser and that wasn't so hot, but that was a me problem, not the game problem. Zach, for next week you can check out a little game we like to call Lego Island.
Oh, I've heard of that game. So Seth had me play Contra 3 Alien Wars. Released in 1992 for the Super Nintendo, also by Konami. Contra 3 Alien Wars is the third game in the Contra series. Like other Contra games, it's pretty hard. The Contra games are all run and gun action platformers. You pretty much do the same thing. You run from the left to the right, and you don't stop shooting. Like the other games in the series, it's a one-hit kill situation. So if you get hit, you die. Like in real life. If you get hit, you die. It's a lot of the Contra games I feel suffer from the same problem, or rather, they all have the same type of gameplay, which is very much based on luck and good timing. Either making sure that you don't get hit by a bullet, or just happening to not get hit by a bullet. But I think this is also part of the charm. It makes them a lot of fun to play, and makes them, games that I think are hard, but in an enjoyable way. Sometimes it's almost cathartic to play a game that is just that difficult at times. I died a lot, but I had a good time, and overall I think it holds up, but only if you don't mind dying a whole bunch and you don't mind seeing the game over screen a lot. Next week, Seth, you can play First Samurai for the Super Nintendo.
Perfect. That's great. So thanks everyone for joining us for another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. If you want to reach out to us and send us any contact information, you can email us at classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com, and we can read your email and get back to you and talk to you. Maybe if you have an idea for the episode or overall just want to compliment our good looks. If you want to follow us on the social media, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitch, all at Classic Gaming Brothers, and we're on Twitter at CG Brothers Pod. We also are available wherever you can listen to podcasts through all the listening apps, so feel free to follow us and subscribe and give us a rating on those podcasting apps so that we can be rated higher than where we were rated before. And that's it. Unless, Zach, am I missing anything?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Zach.
I've been Seth.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.